day, another real world test. Today we're doing on the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. It's a slightly cheaper this year mid-range phone from Samsung. And we're going to test out the phone while we explore as per the usual. But we're not in New York City today. We're upstate, about 2 hours north in a town called Kingston, where my sister lives. But before we do any of that, first things first.
Coffee, check. And this is a coffee shop that I come to a lot when I'm in Kingston. It was actually started by two Aussie musicians in 2018. And funny enough, one of them worked for years at a coffee shop that's like 2 blocks from my house in Williamsburg. Didn't know that till today. Now the store itself has a very general store meets coffee shop kind of a vibe. And they recently added an indoor dining section 2 doors over somehow it used to be a shop, and somehow they can get between in the back to bring you your food that you order via QR code. But it's nice, and it's nice that they even have an indoor space at all. As for a long time, they just had the general store part and like a little outdoor area. But right now, in this kind of heat, nope, I'm melting just trying to do this part right now. Also, breakfast sandwiches here, very good, as well as of course their espresso. All right, while we're here, let's touch on the styling of the phone. Now I've said this about the A52, and I feel the same way about this very similar A53, and that's that it feels more premium than the pricing and the plastic back would suggest. There's just something about it. It feels nice in the hand. It's just more solid than you expect it to be. Now the color options are actually pretty nice as well, as it comes in peach, which I kind of like more than I expected, and we also have white, blue, and the black that I have here. I actually also kind of like the way the camera bump melds into the back of the phone oh so subtly. It's not that large of a bump too, which just helps with the look, I think, in this case. Now lastly, the phone is also IP67, so it's water resistant for down to a meter for 30 minutes, which is becoming more popular at this price range of devices, but it still isn't that common, so that's nice. And something we've seen go missing on basically all higher end devices now is here as well, a micro SD card slot so you could expand the storage.
I got another coffee to go because these are just some of the best, like, no fuss, simple donuts ever. They're like super floofy, and they're warm. And they're little donuts, but they're perfect. They're so good. And apparently they're made to order, which is why they're hot when you get them, in a 1950s Donut Robot 42 machine that can turn out a donut in about 90 seconds. This place is called Half Moon Rondout Cafe. Rondout being the name of the neighborhood that we're in, which we'll talk about more a little later. Now, Half Moon, though, was started during the pandemic and opened on November 9th, 2020. It was started by 2 locals as well that live in this neighborhood who recognized that there wasn't any cafes in this part of town and wanted to rectify that and decided to, quote, retire and make donuts, end quote. I think I speak on behalf of everybody in Kingston when I say we're happy they did. Okay, so for the screen on this phone, it's kind of as you would expect from Samsung. The screen is very similar to the one on the S22 Plus with just a 0.1 inch difference in size, and it doesn't get quite as bright. It's even a 120 hertz screen, so that means scrolling is smoother, and is a Super AMOLED display with bright colors and contrast. Now, while that screen is smooth, I haven't really had the smoothest experience with the phone, if I'm honest. Now, most of the time it's fine, but more often than I'd like, the phone just lags a bit. And it doesn't happen all the time, for sure. So like most of the time it's okay, but when it does happen, you're like, ooh, It makes you a little angry. But maybe it just bothers me and it won't bother you guys as much. Please be here when I get back. I guess this is where I'm supposed to go. Welcome to the Rondout Lighthouse. Now this neighborhood is called Rondout,
as it used to be the village of Rondout, and it sits at the mouth of a creek by the same name, which is where the lighthouse is. Now, the lighthouse here, though, is only accessible by boat, which you can catch Thursday through Sunday in season from the Maritime Museum, who is now the nonprofit who helps take care of the lighthouse. And apparently, they just started running this new, completely solar-powered boat, aptly named Solaris. It's the quietest boat I think I've ever been on. Now, this is the third lighthouse here, actually, and it was built in 1915 to replace the second one that was built in 1867 that was just across the mouth of the creek here, and that one replaced the original wooden one from 1837. Now, this creek was an important passage for coal from northern Pennsylvania to the Hudson River and then on to New York City during the 1820s or so. The lighthouse here obviously came from the need to mark the entrance to the creek and is one of 9 lighthouses along the Hudson River that still exist. It's actually quite pretty here, and, well, probably a good place to talk about the cameras on the Samsung A53. Now, we have the exact same setup as the A52 from last year, which is maybe a little disappointing, but the cameras aren't bad. We have an ultra-wide 12 megapixel f2.2 aperture camera and a 64 megapixel f1.8 aperture main camera. For video, we can shoot in up to 4K 30 on all of the cameras, but if you shoot in 4K, you lose stabilization, which you might have already noticed in this video. And compared to other devices in this price range, it does a good job. The one thing that I'm not a fan of, though, is the same thing they did last year that I feel the need to be re-mentioned every time it happens on a device. Those 2 cameras are joined by 2 other cameras that are not as useful. One is a macro camera for up-close shots, which, like all macro cameras on phones, you will use 4 or 5 times before the novelty wears off. And frankly, we've also seen many times how you can achieve this same effect using an ultra-wide camera on other phones. So having the extra hardware for this just seems redundant. Equally so, the depth sensor here, which gathers depth information for focus and for portrait mode, which is sort of useful, but also can easily be done with other hardware or even combining data from the ultra-wide and the main again, as we've seen on other devices. It really just feels like, to me, that companies add these types of cameras to the backs of their phones just so they can say it's a triple or a quad camera system, even though you will never use those 2 cameras like you would, say, just some extra telephoto ones.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is it still there? All right.
This is my unofficial sister, Michelle's house. She's a longtime friend of me and my sister's. I think I've actually known her since I was like 16, maybe? Long time, clearly. But she actually lives directly across the street from my sister. She's also a fantastic chef. She's been on Food Network a bunch of times. I was gonna go out to dinner to show you guys another place, but she offered to make food, and it's just better. As much as I love going out to eat, when someone who's good at cooking offers you a home-cooked meal, you take it. What are you making us?
I'm making some banh mi meatballs.
Yum.
Pork, little sugar, little fish sauce, sesame, chili peppers, ginger.
Looks so
Oh,
good.
You want one?
I do.
Give me.
Okay, and while we're here, let's talk about the battery for a sec on the Samsung A53 5G. Here is my battery usage for today, and obviously this is a real test. I used a ton of video, a ton of photos, so it's not really a normal day by any means. So this is an extreme situation. But here is another day that I took the battery information that was a much more normal day, so you can see another scenario and how it did. Now, honestly, it's not bad. I don't think it's any better or worse than last year's model, even though it does have an extra 500 milliamps added to the battery to bring it up to 5,000 instead of 4,500. But to me, at least in most scenarios, it feels about the same, which is not bad at all. Bye, Michelle.
Bye, Davey.
Thank you so much for dinner. It was delicious as always.
Welcome.
The frogs here sound nuts. It's kind of nice, actually.
Okay, calling it a night. Now it really kind of feels like Samsung just basically went, the A52 is great, let's just make it again. Like, if it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of a thing. And I will say it feels very similar. The battery life feels similar to me at least. The only thing I will say is that I found it a little laggy. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's really frustrating, maybe a little more than the A52 did. But also, it's $50 less, which is always a win. All in all, feels like a solid contender for an under $500 phone. But the biggest issue for it is the Pixel 6a that is about to come out, or might have already come out actually by the time this video goes live. But I'll be doing a video on that shortly. So subscribe, ding the bell, so you get notified when I do that video, as well as other real world tests. Always appreciate it. I'll also leave links to the best deal that I can find on this device, should you be interested in learning more about that, in the description below. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching.
Too many cars. That somehow truck. I think he did that on purpose. What do you think? He did. When you go to record and the world's longest train goes by, it's been going by for like a good 7-8 minutes, and I still can't see the end. Just keeps going.